Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
It was a strange letter, Liam, brought by a fast delivery courier. There was no return address on the plastic bag sealed with yellow tape. It was therefore impossible to establish where it had been sent from. Liam, puzzled as to who could have sent him this letter, whirled the package in his hands and asked the courier, "Where is this from?" The envelope usually has the sender's address on it. He shrugged. Liam turned the envelope over and over, but found nothing. Nothing is written here, so the sender decided not to give his address. That happens too. You can sign here on the delivery note. The guy asked annoyingly, "I have 3 more addresses to deliver to." Yes, of course. Liam took the clipboard with the attached sheet and a pen given by the courier and signed, "Have a good day." The delivery man jumped into the car and was off. Liam opened the gate and walked back into the yard. He went into the house and opened the package with a knife. Inside there was only 1 sheet of paper with the text printed on the printer. It said the following: "Liam, when you get this letter, I will be far away from here, but you should know that I am alive. I have chosen my own path, and I will follow it to the end. I'll probably never see you again. Know that I've always loved you. But after everything that's happened, we can never be together again. You know that better than anyone, don't you? Don't try to look for me. I wrote that letter so you wouldn't think I was responsible for my death, because there was no death. Goodbye, Liam. Try to be happy." And at the end, a handwritten signature. "Molly, who used to be your wife." Liam sank heavily onto the stool and covered his eyes. The blood throbbed in his temples, his head was noisy, his legs felt heavy and wouldn't obey him. What is this? What's going on? Some kind of stupid prank. But who in heaven's name would make a joke like that? Liam's thoughts were running wild like raging horses. After sitting like that for about 10 minutes, he got up, walked around the room, reread the letter again and again. He clutched his head, ran out into the yard, rushed into the barn, pulled out a huge stump, and began to chop logs from an old pear tree that had recently been cut down for firewood. At the sound of the axe, the old mother came out of her half of the house, looked at it, shook her head, and sat down on a bench nearby. Liam fought with the wood for a long time, until all the anger at the idiot joker came out. With each swing of the axe, he saw again and again the horrible picture he had seen in this very room, where he had read today a letter typed by someone who did not know and had not experienced what he had experienced in the last 6 months. At last, with a swing of his axe into the stump, he staggered away. His mother, still sitting inconspicuously on the bench, said timidly, "Liam, you should eat. I've made soup." "I don't want it." He mumbled and went back to his room. The old woman sighed heavily and followed him. She felt pity for her only son. When she entered the house, she sank down on the floor in front of the images and began to mutter prayers. Liam got dressed, left the house, started his Mazda, and drove away from the city. Not far away, where the Central City Cemetery sprawled beyond the city limits after wide fields, woods, and groves, Liam drove unmistakably along the winding cemetery paths, stopped the car near 2 young fishes, and squelching through the mud with rubber boots, reached a fresh grave without a fence and without a monument, with a simple wooden cross. Looking with pain and longing at the plaque screwed to the crossbar, he said bitterly, "Hello, Molly. Here I am to see you again. It was raining this morning. I trimmed your irises for winter." After a little silence, a little Liam added in a questioning tone, "You didn't write that silly letter, did you?" "I know I didn't." You can't write from there." He sighed heavily and, ignoring the dirt, knelt down in front of the grave, bent down, hiding his face in his hands, swaying from side to side and moaning sadly. "Molly, Molly, my love, why did he do that? How can I be alone now, Molly?" In the administrative building of the city's ritual bureau at the main entrance to the cemetery, it was a normal workday. The girls in the accounting department were sitting at their computers. The administrator, Kelly, was checking something in thick journals. The receptionists were placing orders. The cleaning lady, Wendy, having washed all the offices and a small corridor clean from the morning, was dusting everywhere. Having coped with this task, she watered the flowers and went into the pantry, boiled a kettle, brewed herself a sachet, and wanted to relax from her work. "Wendy." From the door came the aged voice of the cemetery keeper, Grandpa Christopher. "Wendy," repeated Christopher, approaching the table. "I hear you. I hear you. What are you yelling about?" The old janitor, and once a bookkeeper, was a longtime friend of the decrepit watchman. They had seen a lot of things, working side by side on the cemetery land, so to speak. They buried both reds and whites, believers and atheists, old and young beggars and rich, and all other God's creatures, which only walk under the sun until their hour comes. Both buried their spouses, Wendy the husband, Christopher the wife. They'd become friends over the years. Only one thing they couldn't accept, being both old school. And that's what their conversation was about today. "You know what, Wendy? The husband of that young suicide from the grave in Sector 8 still walks around every day, still walks around." "So what?" Wendy snorted. "He's not the first, and he won't be the last. He'll walk and stop. They say their baby died," Christopher said pitifully, pouring boiling water into his mug. "And this is not the first time." Wendy sighed. "I buried 2 of them in the war, and my father, older brother, and 2 younger twins. And now the people are so frail, they're just as likely to jump the gun as anything else." Huh. She spat over her left shoulder. "Fuck them." Yes, the watchman agreed. "People are going crazy. You know what, Wendy?" He suddenly perked up. "What have I noticed?" "Well," Wendy replied, blowing hard on her tea. "A lady came to the grave in the week. I don't remember the date, too." Wendy stretched out indifferently, which must have meant something. "Well, what was it?" "She came," Christopher reported at length. "By dusk, she was already standing for a long time, looking, and I was picking, trimming bushes. But she couldn't stand it. Wendy was almost angry. And what? And then she turned around," solemnly concluded the watchman, paying no attention to the discontent of the interlocutor. "Here I'll tell you straight and dumbfounded." "From what is it?" Wendy asked tiredly. "Like 2 drops of water," solemnly raised his voice the old man. "Here's a cross for you, just like the dead woman. How about a sister?" Wendy yawned. "It happens." No, the watchman objected vehemently. The dead woman herself came to the place of her burial. Suicides always walk like that. They can't lie still in the damp earth. "Yes, that's right. I tell you, the earth doesn't accept them." "Well, it's true," Wendy agreed, getting a little lively. It was not for nothing that they were not buried in the Pogost under the Tsar. Only outside the fence, outside the line. "There," raising his finger to the top, the watchman proclaimed. "That's the way it is. And now they bury anyone right in the cemetery." He sighed. No idea. That was the end of the old men's conversation. Only one thing they didn't know was that most of their conversation was heard by the suicide's husband. When Liam finally stood up from the grave, he remembered that he had to pick up some funeral papers at the cemetery administration building. It had been a month since the funeral, and he still couldn't find the strength to go and sign the papers, to get everything that was due to the relatives in this mournful matter. He shook off the dirt from his pants, the sticking fallen leaves, and loaded himself back into the car. When he entered the building, he saw that they had already started lunch and wanted to leave to pick up another time. But suddenly from behind the ajar door of some storeroom, he heard a loud elderly voice and his own fault in what had happened, trying to understand whether it was possible to prevent the monstrous end. But today's events had made him experience, if not hope. No, of course, there could be no hope. But he must, by all means, get to the bottom of it to keep the memory of his beloved bright, to ultimately justify her horrifying act. They met on a rainy late fall day like this. The weather was worse. It couldn't have been worse. A frantic wind was bending the tops of the tall trees, pouring down frequent freezing rain, freezing on the fly and setting crusty, thin ice. Liam was on his way from the sawmill in the country, driving a car with a trailer loaded to the top with wood, and she was standing at a bus stop, deserted at that evening hour, poorly lit by a dim streetlight, a roadside, unsturdy plastic booth that offered little protection from rain or wind. Liam didn't even see her face at that moment, just being a kind and sympathetic person by nature. He felt sorry for the girl, who was probably freezing in the November weather. Buses from the suburbs didn't run very often. It was easy to stand like that for an hour. So he slowed down his Mazda near a tattered sign with a bus schedule, opened the side window and said, or rather shouted, trying to break through the howling wind, "Girl, can I give you a ride?" No. She shook her head, pulling her hood tighter. "Don't be afraid. Why don't you come with me to town? I'll drop you off at the right stop. You'll freeze here. The bus left about 10 minutes ago. The next one won't be here soon." "I'll wait." "Why don't you?" "Then I'll wait for someone else to come and pick you both up. There's still room in the back. I'm on my way home from the sawmill. No luck." He did drive a little farther away and stood on the curb, blinking his emergency lights. After about 3 minutes, there was a knock on the front window of the girl, frozen with blue hands, turned in. "I'm going all the way down." "Where's the Central Market? Do you know it?" "Yeah." Liam nodded. "I can pass there too." "Get in, don't worry. I'm not dangerous." He smiled. She hesitated a little longer, looked into his eyes, appraising him, and suddenly smiled too. And then she fluttered easily into the front seat. "Sorry, my jacket is very wet," the girl said in a guilty tone, shaking off the frozen, icy crust and taking off her hood. She turned to him shyly, smiling. "Thank you." "I did miss the bus." That's when he saw her eyes. The sweetest, most stunning in the whole world, dark green eyes in thick lashes, with a bright spark inside, and he fell in love immediately and forever. She was shyly twirling the tip of her thick, honey-colored braid, and on her cheeks glistened like diamonds the ice drops that had melted. He wanted very much to take her to his place and never let her go again, but instead, he only asked her politely, "What's your name?" "My name is Liam." "Molly," she answered quietly, not looking at him. But after a few seconds, she timidly looked up in the mirror, caught his gaze, and smiled shyly again, not wanting to take her attention off the road. Good for her, he thought. And then they drove on in silence. Both were shy and didn't know what else to say. When the road led to a stop, Liam slowed down and asked, "Can I give you a ride somewhere closer to the place?" "No need, thank you," said the girl, smiling gratefully. Her smile every time lit those bright lights in her eyes and drew charming dimples on her cheeks. "You look like you've made a detour enough. I'll go, it's close." And she got out of the car and went about her business, and Liam stood like a fool at the bus stop and watched her go. But when she disappeared behind the corner of gray in the twilight houses, he couldn't stand it, turned off the ignition and rushed after her. When she heard his quick footsteps behind her, she turned around fearfully and stared into the darkness, moving into a lump. "Molly." "Excuse me, Molly. I'm sorry," he mumbled awkwardly, stopping a little ways away. "Let me walk you out after all. It's dark, it's scary. Thank you." He smiled again, but it was barely recognizable in the darkness. He walked along, painfully trying to squeeze out one more word, but could think of nothing. "Here we are," said Molly, stopping at the entrance of a typical apartment building. "This is where I live." "Good," nodded Liam. "Goodbye." "Thank you again." And she pressed the door lock button. The heavy iron door opened with a groan, and Molly disappeared into the dimly lit entryway. Well, that's it. Liam thought, "Why am I such a wuss?" Sighing, he walked back to the car and got in. He spent 5 minutes pointlessly watching the sagging wires of lampposts swaying in the wind and drove home. Liam had been quiet and shy since childhood. He never got into a fight, though he was physically superior to his peers and could not be called either a wimp or a weakling. He was involved in the school volleyball club, ran city marathons, studied not that brilliantly, rather normal, had no special achievements. Nothing stood out, neither appearance nor talents. It was always difficult for him to make any kind of relationship with his peers, and then with the opposite sex. He did not dare to approach girls. Liam, his mother, also quiet like her son, told him, "Liam, you're so good, so kind. How will you live?" And she stroked his head like in childhood. He hugged her and kissed her graying head. "Somehow, Mom." "Oh," the woman was sad. "Why didn't you get any character from your father?" Liam father, that's who in their family was endowed with character for everyone. With an iron hand he managed the sawmill, where he was a senior in his own house, where literally everything, from the foundation to the furniture, from the fence to the birdhouse, made with his own hands. She taught her son all kinds of work, and above all the art of carpentry. Liam adopted these fatherly qualities to the fullest extent, so when his father, strong and healthy, never complaining about anything, suddenly died of a heart attack, he took over all the household chores that a man should do in the house. It was in the 9th grade, so he and his mother were left alone. They had some savings, which quickly ran out, but Liam's uncle, my father's younger brother, helped a lot. He had worked in a bank all his life and strongly advised his daughter-in-law to invest in a cooperative apartment as soon as possible. So she did, registering it on her son. This saved the father's savings and allowed them to live normally. They rented out the apartment, fed themselves with a vegetable garden and some small livestock. My uncle was a good help. If not for him, Liam and his mother would have had a hard time in those years. Having finished school, Liam did not go to the institute. He studied 3 years at the Automobile Mechanical Technical School. He said that his specialized secondary education was enough for him to work with wood. At first, he worked in the garage, where his father had a beautiful workshop, and after a few years he opened his own company, the construction company Liam and Partners. Business went well, and soon Liam provided work for 12.5 employees. After a couple of years, he hired an executive director who was engaged in all sorts of routine and left himself only the most urgent functions and work for the soul, restoration of antique furniture, and making various beautiful little things. He still had no girlfriend. Of course, one-time connections happened, but really did not meet with any woman. The employees called him Arbiriak in private, but they loved him affectionately. Liam was a good manager, fair, businesslike, and thorough. He valued people, respected them, and never once allowed himself to raise his voice at his subordinates. As a result, he even became a better boss and businessman than his father once was. He didn't have his father's toughness, it's true, and that didn't stop Liam from achieving success. But at home, he was content with little. His lifestyle was practically the same as before. He did not chase fashion, did not buy expensive cars, and drove his old Mazda. In the office for business meetings, dusted in the closet expensive suit, and the driver polished in the garage black BMW. That evening, when Liam got a ride to the Molly stop, he came home elated. His mother, always waiting for him, no matter how late he returned, saw the change immediately. While her son ate dinner, she sat beside him, looking at him affectionately and quietly. She in general was always so quiet, modest, inconspicuous, discreetly led the household, discreetly picking in the vegetable garden, tended the cattle, never complained, was always a shadow, her bright, assertive husband. Did you finally find her son? She asked Liam when he set aside his empty plate. Yes, he nodded. I found Mom. And smiled a calm, affectionate smile, as he always did. Even in late fall, when some days are mostly gloomy and short, the sun still lights up the streets in the mornings. Albeit briefly, but the more valuable is this early gentle light. It is well known to those who get up early every day. Every morning before work, Molly walked her dog, a small brown dog with funny ears. Rescued a couple years ago from a dumpster where vicious animals had thrown him to die with his littermates. Molly adopted all of them, but kept this one for herself. After all, she had always had cats and dogs at home. And that morning, opening the driveway door, she, as usual, gathered a shorter leash to prevent Chupchiku to run out on the roadway. Who knows what kind of daredevil driver would get caught? But today Chupchik, always running out as if on fire, suddenly braked sharply and barked. Molly saw it a little later than the dog and also stopped in amazement. Right in front of their driveway stood a real carriage, a luxurious, marvelous mint-colored with silver, drawn by a pair of sleek raven horses. In front sat the coachman, in green livery, waving a short whip. As if by magic, the carriage door opened and a young man in a good suit and carrying a basket of snowdrops stepped out. Good morning, Molly. He bowed and came closer to her. Please accept my humble gift. I'm walking the dog, confusedly answered Molly, flapping her eyes. Can I keep you company? Asked the unexpected suitor. Have I seen you somewhere before? Pensively stretched out the girl, and then she realized. You are the same driver with a trailer who took me to the city a week ago. She happily recognized her accidental companion. Liam, is that right? That's right, he bowed again. I didn't dare to ask you to meet me last time because the atmosphere was not favorable. You were tired, cold, and obviously in a hurry to get home. Now I dare not keep you too long either. I just have one favor to ask of you. Would you agree to dine with me tonight? Or any other day that suits you? I'm not busy tonight. Molly laughed. She suddenly felt so at ease. How pleasant it was, this unexpected occurrence on an ordinary November morning. Great! Lion was clearly pleased. Then accept this. He made a sign with his hand, and another man, in plainer clothes, brought a large, beautiful box from the carriage. We're having a theme night, said Liam. The carriage will be here for you at 9 o'clock sharp. Good. I'll be out with Chupchick from 8 till 9:30. Permission to deviate? Said Lion. The box and the basket will be waiting for you here when you come back from your walk. And so it came to pass. The carriage was gone, but the man who had come with Lion was waiting for the presents when Molly and Chubby returned home an hour later. He carried them up to Molly's door and then into the apartment, bowed and left. In the box was a gorgeous medieval-style dress, long, embroidered with glittering beads, with a double skirt and flared sleeves of marvelous emerald velvet with gold trim. It fit Molly's slim figure perfectly and suited her well. Looking at herself in the mirror, Molly wondered if there was a catch. Is it worth it to go to an unknown place and a complete stranger, in fact, a person? True, some maniac would hardly splurge on a dress and carriage, but who knows him? Thinking thus, Molly absent-mindedly looked through the box from under the dress and found in it a small card, which she did not notice at once. On it was a picture of a beautiful old building that Molly knew. It was an old nobleman's mansion. In the old days, it had been home to the family of a count who had an estate and a large plot of land in this province, and now it was home to the most luxurious restaurant and hotel in the city. On the back of the postcard was printed the following: Mr. Liam, CEO of Liam and Associates, invites you, lovely Molly, to a private dinner party to be held on November 16 at 8:30 at Victoria and Albert's. I look forward to seeing you there. Sincerely, Liam. And there was a handwritten signature. When Molly arrived at work that day, at the city's Social Security office, she showed the card to her coworker Clara. Do you think we should go? Wow! Clara marveled. How did you do it? After all, this is the same firm, Liam and Associates, that built the new park. A thematic park, visiting a fairy tale, where among the greenery and flowers settled famous fairy tale subjects, skillfully made mostly of wood, became a gift from this company to the city and a new local attraction. In addition, every weekend here at the expense of the same company, held various charity events. Then children from the orphanage were brought to walk and have fun on the rides for free, then organized sports competitions with prizes from the sponsor. Yes, Molly herself has repeatedly participated in the fair Take a Friend Home, where volunteers adopted dogs and cats from the shelter in good hands. Yes, Molly agreed, and I think I just met their director. Really? Clara was interested. Tell me about it. And Molly told everything as it was, and about today's carriage, and about dresses, and about the basket with snowdrops. Lucky you, friend, said Clara, listening to her story. You seem to have drawn a lucky ticket from fate. It was said not enviously, but in a friendly way with sincere joy for Molly. So you think it's worth it to go? Molly asked. My God, she's still thinking, splashed hands Clara. Listened to her, and laughed. However, there was no one to listen to. The two of them were sitting in a tiny office, processing social payments, subsidies, and benefits. Formally, Clara was Molly's boss, but in fact they were good friends, ready, if anything, to help and sympathize. To sympathize with Molly, at least until that day, there was something to sympathize with. She'd been an orphan since she was 10 years old. Her parents were killed in a car accident while returning home from a vacation. Molly didn't go with them that time. She stayed with her grandmother in a small wooden house with a mezzanine buried in the green of gardens not far from the suburbs. Her grandmother brought her up, raised her to adulthood, taught her everything she knew: cooking, sewing, housekeeping, and caring for pets. That's why Molly grew up like a city girl and like a country girl. And in their oldest town, on the big river, There were still a lot of private buildings where people have long lived their own households, like Liam's parents. On the day he'd given her a ride, she'd just come back to town from her grandmother, who left every weekend. Molly, for all her gorgeous looks, was a very modest girl. Cosmetics practically did not use, dressed very simply, in everyone and everything saw first of all kindness and beauty. And people communicating with her revealed their best side. Immediately after school, she experienced an unsuccessful romance, which she did not like to talk about, and since then no one else has not met. Probably, if she had led a different lifestyle, there would be no shortage of suitors. But she just didn't have a place to meet men her own age. After graduating from social college, she went to work in the City Department of Social Security, where both employees and visitors represented quite a different contingent that would be interested in amorous relations. She helped lonely old people, disabled people, and abandoned dogs. I lived in my parents' 3-room apartment, 1 room rented, for a purely symbolic fee to girl students, choosing quiet and not walking. So she lived until she was 25 years old, simple and uncomplicated. Sometimes she and her grandmother sit in the evening near the stove, the old lady on an old chair, with knitting in her hands. Molly, as in her childhood, at her feet on a fluffy mat with a book. It's nice and warm and cozy. The wood is crackling, the flames are dancing, only Grandma, no, and sighs. Molly, my dear, when will you make me happy with great-grandchildren? I don't know, Grandma. You're so beautiful. Don't you have anyone in mind? No, Grandma, except Benjamin. Molly laughs. Benjamin, a regular customer of Molly's social establishment, was a brave 80-year-old soldier, a retired high rank, who for many years half-jokingly, half-seriously gave Molly all sorts of signs of his old man's attention. Molly respected him, steadfastly tolerated long monologues and vain courtship, and did not pay any attention to the constant banter of colleagues. I'll tell you what, said then Grandma, sliding her glasses. Throw you out of the head of this scoundrel. Please, he won't give you peace, and you won't be happy until you forget him. Molly was silent and frowning, and only stroked her grandmother's warm, wrinkled hand. But on this November Saturday, she literally flew in the wicket, ran across the yard, and bursting into the house, whirled the old woman around the kitchen. Grandma, you'll never believe where I was yesterday. Where? Concerned was the one, but to see in her granddaughter's eyes, and joy and delight calmed down. She looked under her blind eyes and saw what she had not expected to find for a long time, a lust for life. Such a joyful and cheerful, a little carefree, was her granddaughter in her youth. When in her senior year of high school, she met a man much older than herself, and they had a stormy, impetuous affair. And when the affair ended, as suddenly as it began, in Molly's eyes, extinguished that joyful fire. Of course, the grandmother then was strongly opposed to Molly connection with a grown man. To think of it, a schoolgirl and a man divorced, God knows what it will lead to. But Molly put up an unexpected and stubborn resistance to all of Grandma's attempts to end this abnormal relationship. How can you not understand? It's love. She fervently argued her position to her grandmother. It is not we who choose the beloved, but our heart, and the heart cannot command. Oh, an unnecessary you in books about love read. The old woman lamented, wiping away her tears. Look, he will disgrace you, take advantage of you, and leave you. What will you do then? I don't know, Grandma. Molly answered, almost crying too. But one thing I do know. I can't do without him, you know. Oh my God! Grandma was horrified. What did he do to you? How could he? At least my mother and father can't see me. Oh, woe is me. Grandma, calm down, please. Molly persuaded her. I'm not in any danger, you know. He's not forcing me to do anything bad, believe me. I can only hope so. What else can I do, Molly? You can love me like you always have, and I'll always love you. Molly hugged her grandmother. Don't cry, please don't cry. And to convince her grandmother that she was right and safe, she brought her lover home to get acquainted. They were drinking tea and feeling very awkward, all except Ethan. That was Molly's name for the suitor. He was indeed an attractive man. Even grandmother had to agree with that. Tall, statuesque, handsome, with a small straight beard, with dark, lively, and intelligent eyes. He certainly made an impression. Any woman would be happy to accept the signs of attention of such an admirer. What to speak of a young girl? Besides, he was obviously not poor and could offer his lady of the heart all sorts of life's goods. I'm a businessman. He told his grandmother after greetings and numerous assurances of his honest intentions, and a financier by education. And I worked as a senior accountant at the factory until my retirement. Smiled involuntarily, grandmother. And little Molly was always confused, said the dreaded accountant. So my co-worker, smiled Ethan. And good accountants are a terrible force indeed. Molly was right about that, and he looked affectionately at the girl sitting next to him, pink with happiness. Believe me, Vanessa, I will not harm your granddaughter in the slightest. My intentions are honorable. I'm ready to marry, and Molly will be securely provided for. Isn't that what you want for your only granddaughter? And Grandma Vanessa, she gave in. But he seems like a decent man. He's going to get married. What's the age difference? Maybe it's for the best. What's a young boy who hasn't had his first chance to put up with need? And what with a grown-up, and besides a well-to-do husband, to live in prosperity? It's, as they say, two big differences. Besides, Molly is madly in love, so the grandmother gave her blessing, to the delight of her granddaughter. Although her heart was scraping her hidden suspicions, a secret fear that not everything is as smooth as it seems. For a few months their relations had been going on quite decently. Ethan came, at weekends took Molly to the movies, to the park, brought various guests, grandmother all strictly inspected that nothing unnecessary, no unnecessary luxury. Once she told me to bring back a pocket mirror in a frame. Why? Protested Molly, who was sorry to part with the gift. It is not good to carry a mirror with you. Our soul is reflected in it, and God forbid you lose it or break it. It's not good. And what do you look in it? You don't paint your lips, at least I hope you don't. There's no need to correct such beauty. When you get married, you'll be your own mistress. Then you'll decide what to do. But listen to me, it won't be long now. And Molly had to give the mirror back. And so it went from week to week. We met the last Molly, the school Christmas, but she didn't go to the disco anymore. Ethan took her to the theater for an adult play. At the end of the school year, she only went to get her diploma. Even dresses were not ordered dressy. In a school uniform and a white apron, Molly served the solemn ceremony as a necessary duty, and on the graduation party did not even appear. Again with Ethan went to a restaurant. Grandma Vanessa didn't like it all that much. She was grumbling to herself. Takes the joy out of Molly. Once in a lifetime prom. It's not human. But Molly just laughed. What am I supposed to do there, Grandma? Dance with the boys when my husband's practically waiting for me. Grandma said nothing, rattling pots and pans in the kitchen. In the summer, she was shocked to hear that Molly and Ethan were going to the seaside together. But no, there was no such agreement. If he gets married, then let him take her wherever he wants to go. Do you know who they take to the seaside without a wedding ring? Grandma, come on. Molly persuaded her. Don't you want me to look at the sea? Yeah, Ethan and I have different rooms at the spa. Stop worrying. I'm begging you. But what's the big deal? Don't you trust me? I don't. Vanessa was tempted to say so, but she held back. She was a wise woman with a lot of self-control. She understood well that one wrong, hurtful word could hurt worse than a knife. You can ruin a relationship for life. So even here she kept silent, although she knew perfectly well how difficult it is for a young, turbulent, boiling, in-love nature to refrain from love attraction, to control her feelings. Ethan was more likely to be a grown-up, experienced man who could handle himself, although Vanessa wasn't sure about him either. That's why she sent Molly to the seas, and everything was boiling in her soul with bad premonitions. But what could she do? Hold her by force? Lock her in the house? It would be better not to, only to make trouble on her gray-haired head. What could she do, a weak old woman? Vanessa did not sleep well at night, thinking, tossing from side to side, and during the day she sighed, grumbled, prayed, and mourned until Molly saw her. But she held on. I hope for the best. Hope springs eternal. Let me know when you get there. She told Molly as she walked her to the station. And do not lie under the sun for a long time. Burn or, God forbid, sunstroke. And they also say that in the sea jellyfish can be poisonous. Stop it, Grandma. Molly laughed. What poisonous jellyfish? Oh, sighed Granny. There are enough sea monsters in these seas. Don't worry, Vanessa. Ethan assured her. Just 2 weeks and we'll be back. We'll be fine. Molly's perfectly safe with me, believe me. God be with you. Have a good trip. The old woman said, and just looked at them with sad, tearful eyes. But they came back much later. It so happened that just a few days after their arrival, Molly's appendix was inflamed. The attack happened while she and Ethan were away from the sanatorium, high in the mountains on an excursion. She was brought to the clinic much later than she should have been, and the emergency surgery was difficult, and afterwards the inflammatory process began. Molly spent 3 days in intensive care in an unstable condition. Her grandmother at home would go crazy with worry, so Molly forbade Ethan to tell her what had happened. They told her later, when it was no longer life-threatening. But for 3 more weeks, Molly had to stay in the ward instead of enjoying the sea, the sun, and the delights of the South. She returned home gaunt, haggard, pale, as if she was not at the resort and in prison. Yes, in fact, the hospital intensive care unit was not much different from a prison, but that was not the worst part. Molly came back alone. She took a cab home from the train station. Without Ethan, she answered her grandmother's perplexed questions with one-word answers. Everyone was more reticent. Of course, Vanessa immediately realized that there was a rift between the lovers. But Molly never told her exactly what had happened, only stated the fact. We broke up, Grandma. It was a mistake. Ethan won't be coming here again. Wise Vanessa stepped back and didn't ask any more questions. At first, of course, she suspected the worst, that the scoundrel had taken advantage of the girl and left her without regret. Vanessa from day to day waited for the appearance of grave consequences, Molly's unsuccessful affair. But weeks and months passed, and it became clear that there would be no consequences. Molly was not pregnant. Vanessa breathed a sigh of relief, but although physically her granddaughter had recovered from her illness, mentally she had suffered much more. You can say that she left home a girl, naive, laughing, dreamy, a real maximalist like everyone in her youth. and she came back a wise woman, sad, disappointed. Baba Vanessa had heard her granddaughter sobbing in her room at night, more than once and more than twice. She saw how long she could not fall asleep in the evenings, how her light burned half the night, how something tormented her granddaughter, and how the joy, the young sparkling joy of life, flowed out of her drop by drop. Molly spent the rest of the summer behind the fence, never leaving the house beyond the vegetable garden. Sometimes she would sit on a bench under an apple tree and look, seemed to be looking somewhere. But where can you look farther than the raspberry patch? So she was trying to see something in herself. Vanessa just sighed and prayed. She tried to persuade her granddaughter to go to church, to confess, to take communion, saying that it would be easier if you talked to the Holy Father. But Molly only grimaced. "It's all lies, Grandma. There is no God there, only business." Baba Vanessa stood there, shook her head sadly, and did not make any more such suggestions. At the beginning of August, a small event occurred that revitalized Molly a little. A kitten woke up in their house. It was small and colorful, like a patchwork rug. He came into the kitchen on trembling thin legs and squeaked like a mouse. And he's no bigger than a mouse himself, with a tail as thick as Molly's little finger. What's the matter with the soul? But Molly was so happy to see him, as if she'd met an old friend. "Grandma, look how cute he is. And so colorful, all made of rags." She gave the kitten some milk and put it to sleep in her arms. She sat happily with the tiny cub, eyes burning almost as before that ill-fated trip to the seas. The kitten soon became so attached to Molly that it followed her like a dog and slept in bed with her. And Molly did not like him at all. She named it Musia because it turned out to be a cat, and Musia grew up to be a hunter to the envy of all. She was a good cat, a rat catcher, which is quite uncommon among their cat tribe. Since that day, when the cat came to them, Molly began to revive. Little by little, she came to herself. She started smiling again, talking about everything, going out of the house. The first time not far to the village store, then and in the city visited on various matters. And at the end of the summer she applied to the Social Technical College and got in. I, Grandma, moved to the city, to the apartment. It's very hard to go to the technical school from here every day. It's a long way. You have to get up at 5 o'clock. Oh well, Vanessa said, "You have to study, of course, go." She let her granddaughter out of the nest and into the big life. Although it did not happen as planned, but still grew up. In September, Molly turned 18. She and her grandmother collected some money, hired a car, and moved her granddaughter to the city, to her parents' apartment. Grandma Vanessa withdrew money from her account and found a team of craftsmen in the village. They made some repairs in the apartment. Vanessa walked around the familiar rooms and wiped her eyes, tears welling up. The deceased daughter seemed to stand outside the bedroom door as if alive, but no. You open it and the fragile vision dissipates, blurred in the bright electric light. "How will you be alone in here?" Vanessa asked Molly. "Isn't it scary?" "I'll get my own tenants, Grandma. I don't need so many rooms, and maybe you'll change your mind and move in with me." The girl asked hopefully, looking into her native face. Vanessa sighed. "I'd love to, honey, but the vegetable garden and the cattle, who would I leave them to? They feed us." But when Molly left and took the cat with her, Grandmother became very sad. She bent over the house and garden, not knowing what to do. Everything fell out of her hands. It took her a long time to get used to the fact that now she was all alone in the house. Her granddaughter came only on weekends, and even then not always. One Friday evening it was, near the house, a car stopped. Vanessa thought that Molly had come with some problem and went out to the yard to meet her. She walked along the path to the gate and saw Ethan standing near the car. "Hello, Vanessa," he said politely. "Is Molly home? And don't you get sick?" The woman replied, frowning. "Molly doesn't live here anymore." "Why not?" Ethan asked in surprise. "None of your business." Vanessa cut her off and walked back down the path. "Wait, Vanessa!" Ethan shouted after her. There was real desperation in his voice. "Wait, please." Vanessa turned around and looked at him questioningly, tentatively. "What else do you want?" But she didn't come any closer. "I really need to see her. For God's sake, tell me how to find her." He came close to the wooden fence and, ignoring the dirt, leaned against it, wrapping his arms around the boards. He looked at her with a pleading gaze, but Vanessa did not soften. "You have deceived and tormented an innocent soul, you wretch." Her eyes flashed with anger. "Let your spirit be no more here." And she went back inside. But since that time she had seen a black car with its headlights off, not far from the house. The windows were covered with mud, so you couldn't see what was inside. But Vanessa was sure Ethan was inside, waiting for Molly to show up. "Ah, murderer." She scolded slowly when she saw him again. "That's how you have blackness inside, like on your glass, and you can't see it at once. You hide it, you monster." She wanted very much to warn her granddaughter, to tell her that Ethan had come, but she did not dare to hurt Molly. And, of course, she realized that sooner or later, since the scoundrel had reappeared, he would see Molly. It was not for nothing that she sat and waited, like a spider in a web. But I was afraid he'd take her away by force, snatch her away in the night. It's a quiet and deserted alley that leads to a dead end. So she went to the local policeman and complained that he was sitting near the house, scaring her, not letting her live peacefully. Well, it seems the district officer talked or something else took action. Vanessa did not inquire any more, but the car did not stand in their alley anymore. A few more months went by. Molly still showed up on weekends, still quiet, still behaving as usual. Ethan never showed up, so she concluded she'd blown him off. Good girl. A few years had passed since then, and the events of those long ago moved away, entailed, and no longer disturbed her grandmother. Molly studied at the technical school, began to work, became interested in volunteering in shelters for pets. The kitty, by the way, after some time brought back from the apartment. I felt sorry for her, Grandma. She explained to Vanessa. All day long she sits on the windowsill, looking at the street, at the birds. Once she almost fell out of the window. She would have crashed from the 7th floor. So let her lie here at home where she's used to, where she's bored alone all day long. Of course, agreed Grandmother, stroking satisfied Musia. She's used to running around in the wild. Everyone needs freedom, every living soul, and you won't be so bored alone during the week. Molly smiled. Well, I'm at work. I'm not bored here. Vanessa shrugged it off, but she was really glad Musia was back, though wordless, but still their own native animal. He would come and paw at her feet, jump into her arms, and sing songs. Grandmother sits by the fire and thinks different thoughts under the cat's songs. Mostly, of course, about her granddaughter. Vanessa was very worried about her. Though Ethan, as it seemed to her, had been finished long ago, something had broken in Molly since then. She was as affectionate and friendly as before, but she didn't get close to anyone, and she didn't have a single friend. Acquaintances don't count. For example, a colleague from work, Clara, it would seem that every day together, the whole life as in the palm of her hand. But no, and her Molly was not allowed to her soul, and about her unhappy romance preferred not to tell. Even Vanessa still didn't know how and why they'd gotten so upset. Molly avoided the subject with a stubborn silence, no matter how many times her grandmother tried to gently prod her for details. Finally, the Vanessas backed off. What was that has passed and bygone. It is not worth stirring up smoldering embers, so as not to inadvertently fan the hot fire. It's more likely. The embers have burned out by now. At least Vanessa hoped so. But Molly never met anyone else, never talked about her personal life, and never brought home any guy she knew. Vanessa grieved. She would not wait for her grandchildren. She would not see her granddaughter's life. Therefore, on that late autumn Saturday morning, when Molly with burning eyes, with ruddy cheeks burst into the house, grandmother's loving heart trembled with joyful anticipation. "Molly, my darling." She hugged her granddaughter and stroked her cheek affectionately. "And I made pancakes. Want some? With cherry jam?" "I will." Molly responded enthusiastically. "Of course I will." Vanessa was happy and began to work in the kitchen, giving her pet various treats. Molly, who had been eating like a bird lately, had a great appetite this morning, much to her grandmother's delight. She laughed, joked, and rejoiced in every little thing like a schoolgirl. Grandmother wondered, and it all cleared up when the table was cleared, and Molly told her about last night's adventure and her acquaintance with Liam. From the very first time they'd met, when he'd given her a ride into town, picking her up from a cold bus stop. "Can you believe it, Grandma?" Molly said, glowing. "Me and Chubchick, we come out of the entrance, and there's a carriage. The very real carriage, like from a fairy tale about Cinderella. You should have seen it." Vanessa laughed and marveled. The story was incredibly beautiful. And grandmother listened attentively, while Molly told and told about her date with the handsome prince, looking far away through the window. The carriage pulled up to the restaurant building. The huge, gaudy Victoria and Albert's lettering gleamed on the ancient facade, obscuring the skillful bas-reliefs. Molly faintly wrinkled her nose, and it didn't escape her companion's attention. "I don't like it either." Trustingly, he informed her, leaning toward her. "But that's all right. Perhaps things will change soon." Dinner was amazing, like a fairy tale. They had the whole fireplace room to themselves, decorated in the pre-revolutionary manner. A fire burned in the huge fireplace, lined with white stone. Everywhere hung pictures in gilded frames. There were luxurious vases, carved statuettes, and bronze candlesticks with wax-weeping candles. In the far corner nestled a large grand piano, beautifully inlaid and with an open lid. As soon as they entered the hall, live music began to play. A small orchestra near the piano played a lovely old melody on stringed instruments, and a waiter in white gloves greeted them solemnly, escorting them to the table. The dinner passed off admirably. Liam was gallant and polite. Molly felt like a fairy princess, and when he took out of the inner pocket of his expensive tailsuit a velvet box with a gold ring, she even wept from surprise. Liam had proposed to her. He was ready to marry her at any moment. "That's how it is, Grandma." The girl finished her story. "And what did you decide?" Vanessa asked, looking thoughtfully at her granddaughter. "I don't know yet." Embarrassed, Molly answered, "It's all so sudden." "Come out." Suddenly the grandmother said confidently, "Come out, honey, and don't even think about it." "How, Grandma?" Molly marveled. "How can you say that? You haven't even seen him once." "So," Vanessa responded, "but I feel perfectly well, having heard your story, that he is a good man, a whole man. Such people are not on the road, Molly. Molly herself felt that Liam was the one she would be like a stone wall behind. During the remaining month and a half before Christmas, they met several times, went for walks with Chubchick, went skiing, even had a tour at Liam's workplace. And of course, they met a few relatives. Liam organized a party together. His mother was much closer to Molly, the grandmother, as she aged than to her parents would have been had they been alive. The two older women found common ground easily and quickly, and that same day, with tears of joy, blessed their children with a happy life together. The wedding was scheduled for the end of March. Liam, please don't have a lavish ceremony, Molly said. I am even afraid to imagine how much that fabulous dinner cost and how many good deeds could be organized with that money. Quietly, she added, worrying how her chosen one would take this soft criticism. How good you are! Only instead he hugged her. Everything, you know, just the kind of wife I needed. But still once in my life, I had to arrange something grand for my beloved, and it worked. He looked jokingly into her eyes. Oh, come on! Molly laughed involuntarily. All right, it helped. And she put her arms around his neck, giving him her most tender kiss. That was the deal. No frills, a modest ceremony at the marriage institution, and a wedding in the temple. The latter was particularly pleasing to both Liam and Molly. It was a balm to the soul. Then a festive dinner was planned, in the same restaurant and in the same hall, for all the nearest and dearest. There were only a few people: Molly's grandmother, her cousin, an old man who helped her and Molly while they were still strong, a couple of Vanessa's close friends' neighbors, a few of Molly's friends from the volunteer center, and above all, Clara's colleague. On Liam's side, of course, Mom, a few close relatives and 3 of his co-workers, the executive director, the chief accountant, and the senior foreman. Get acquainted. This is my 3-headed dragon. This is how he jokingly introduced his assistants to Liam, his future wife, when they first met. We've been through fire, water, and copper with them. If it weren't for these wonderful, in every way people, I wouldn't have made it. The wedding went as smoothly as it could have. The charming bride in a simple white dress with a small hairpin and veil, and the personable groom in a dark blue suit made a lovely couple. Liam was not a fatal beauty, unlike Ethan. The simplest European face, honest, without any double bottom. But happiness made his face truly beautiful. Besides single until now, the owner of a well-known company, a man of wealth, and not prone to the usual vices of rich idlers, he was, no doubt, the most enviable party in town. But to Molly, his fortune was not the decisive factor. Rather, character, similarity of thought, lifestyle. They'd both been brought up in a strict, no-frills upbringing. They knew from their own experience how money was made and knew its real value. Both Molly and Liam, without collusion, had the same idea, instead of going on a honeymoon, to make a serious donation to the needy. Thus, the city orphanage, a nursing home, a hospice, and a perinatal center received huge sums of money. Molly, on the other hand, received from her husband the most wonderful gift she could imagine. Liam gave her her own dog shelter. That's how their life together began, fun and easy. Molly never asked anything from her rich husband, nor did she change anything in her lifestyle, having married and become the wife of one of the most influential people in town, except that she no longer worked at the Social Security office. Benjamin, her former boss, was not comforted, but hundreds of homeless, offended by fate and people, who had not known love and care before furry and tail pets got their fairy. Molly ruled her kingdom with a loving but firm hand. At the end of the year, Another joyous event happened to the young family on Christmas Eve. Molly and Liam learned that they were expecting a child. That's right, they found out together. They'd always done everything together. And when Molly suspected a new little life inside her, she didn't even think of going to the doctor alone. "We have to find out together," she told her husband. Of course, agreed Liam, and they went to the doctor. Well, let's see. The monitor of the ultrasound machine was turned to them. And there's our little prince. The news of a grandson and great-grandson made both mother and grandmother sob with happiness. And the first words they both uttered were exactly the same. "At last, I couldn't wait. Molly, my baby." Grandma Vanessa wiped her tears with the tip of her handkerchief. "Take care of yourself, my dear. Don't overwork yourself. Take your vitamins." "Yes, yes, Grandma," Molly agreed, smiling and wiping away her tears. She was both happy to see her grandmother's happiness and bitter that time spared no one. How long had it been since Granny was still a sturdy young woman? "Oh, long ago," Molly answered herself. "And I was just finishing elementary school, and suddenly I was crying harder than my grandmother." Liam and Vanessa got worried and put her on the couch, ran in and brought her some valerian. "It's all right." Molly, who had cheered up after a few minutes, calmed them down. "It was just hormones. Wait till I start eating plaster and demanding chestnut pudding in the middle of the night. And you'll get it as soon as you want it," her husband assured her. "Now get some rest." Molly's pregnancy flowed easily, not even a leg cut off, and almost no toxicosis, all term excellent tests. So the news that their baby boy is down took everyone by surprise. But he's practically healthy, Molly said desperately as she unwrapped the diapers. "He doesn't look sick at all." "What? What's wrong with him?" "You see," the woman doctor coughed awkwardly, "for a while it will seem like he's no different from any other baby. But soon the mental and physical retardation will become apparent, even outwardly. A child with Down syndrome is easy to recognize. They all kind of look the same." "Nonsense," Molly objected vehemently. "He looks like Liam. There's the eyes and the nose." She lowered her head and cried. "Molly, my dear," Liam came to her. "Calm down, please. We'll get through this. The main thing is that we're together." "Yes, yes. It can be cured, can't it?" "We'll cure it." Molly was happy with her new thought. "What do you think, doctor?" "It's a disease caused by a genetic malfunction." The doctor began carefully. "A chromosomal abnormality, quite common, by the way. There are methods to train the intellect. Some of the patients can live long enough. Others are even capable of limited work activity." Molly wasn't listening to her anymore. She was absorbed in her baby. She swaddled him again, held him close to her, sang a lullaby in his ear, whispered something softly. Finally, resolutely, she said to her husband, "Let's go home, Liam. The walls help at home. William and I can manage. You'll see." "Of course we will." Liam put his arm around his wife and gently, supporting her by the shoulders, led her out of the study. For 2 long years they had been getting used to the fact that they were parents of an invalid child. 2 years of their lives were spent on endless tests, studies and exercises, infusion, lapping, physiotherapy, homeopathic treatment, and other procedures. The bottom line loomed one way. Their William, their son, their firstborn, would never become a full human being. All of Liam's money, or should I say, all of the world's money, was powerless to solve this small problem, the size of a single chromosome. Molly's cheerful optimism lasted just about that long. By William's 2nd birthday, she was off the rails. "What can I get you, darling?" Liam had asked her the day before. What's the occasion? Molly grumbled unhappily. What's that? What's the occasion? The birth of our son. Liam smiled. Oh, that. Molly grinned mournfully. Give him a new chromosome set, a whole one, not broken. What, you can't? She shrieked, seeing the judgment and sadness in her husband's eyes. And I thought you were all-powerful. The great Liam. Look at him. He can buy everything, but not what is really needed. She was screaming at the top of her voice. Then she was hospitalized in a neurological clinic for the first time. However, the name neurological did not quite reflect the essence of what was going on here. The patients were wealthy lunatics, roughly speaking, as well as wealthy alcoholics, drug addicts, and those with other related conditions. She came back quiet, lost, broken. She should never have been allowed to carry this burden alone. Said Liam, the chief physician of this forlorn institution, a low, dense man with tired and intelligent eyes. Even with a normal infant, it's very hard on the mother without help. It is physically terribly exhausting. What to speak of such children? Have you not thought to look for a nanny? Or preferably two, a regular au pair and a masseuse nurse? Molly was admitted in this condition primarily due to daily exhaustion. Consider that she hasn't had a decent night's sleep in 2 years. That would kill anyone. Plus the constant realization of her own powerlessness. This has to be dealt with, and quickly. But I kept suggesting that she find an assistant. Liam was confused, but she doesn't want to. She thinks she has to do everything for her son by herself. No, no, the doctor said resolutely, smoking a cigarette. This is absolutely impossible. A little more of this regime, and she will become a regular client of our clinic. Do you understand? Liam was suppressively silent. But before discharge, let me give you some advice of a personal, so to speak, nature. May I speak frankly? Of course, your son will never recover. You need to accept that fact and move on, not try to find a magic cure, because there isn't one. Get him a good nurse, be happy with your wife that you can afford it, and make sure you have another baby. Believe me, you have a good chance of making it happen. Just because your first baby was born this way doesn't mean the next one will be abnormal. I'm sure it doesn't. I'm sure it doesn't. Thank you. Heavy, sighed Liam. I wish I could explain all this to my wife. It's impossible while she's like this. She needs rest. The best thing to do now is to take her away to rest, to take her mind off everything and make her feel better. You know, Emmanuel, Liam cheered up. That's a wonderful idea. Yes, it is. The doctor nodded. That's exactly right. Go far away, somewhere where there is no communication, preferably. Are you suggesting we leave William to a stranger and go on vacation? Molly looked indignantly at Liam. I'm not suggesting it, sweetheart. I'm putting you on notice. Liam replied firmly. Understand it's necessary. Your doctor said you won't get better otherwise. You need rest. How can I rest, knowing that my son is suffering here alone, and he needs his mom, and his mom left him and went on vacation? What are you talking about, Liam? And Molly cried. Molly, he won't be at home and he won't be alone. He will be in good hands in a specialized clinic where he will be given proper care. Proper care? Will they give him love? A mother's love that can't be replaced. Yes, he won't even recognize himself. Liam got angry. Don't you realize that? He smiles at me. Molly said quietly. Smiling, you know. That's all he can do, smile. He can't say what he's thinking or ask you and me for anything. He can only smile when he feels good. And he only does it with me. Darling, Liam sank down in front of her right on the floor, hugged her knees and pulled her to him. My darling, understand. He's sick, he's very sick, and he'll never get better. And you and I will have more children. Let go. In an icy tone, Molly said, "Let me go now." That was the end of their conversation. However, Lime still managed to break his wife's stubborn resistance. With the help of Emmanuel, pumped with sedatives, Molly was put on a plane and taken. "You know, they told me here that such special children." She said it now quite calmly. "Hippotherapy is very helpful. Can we buy him a little pony?" "Of course we will." Lime agreed happily. "And you know, I was thinking maybe we should move to a bigger house. We could have everything set up for William. A gym, a swimming pool, a room for a nurse, and a lawn for hippotherapy. What do you think? I say I have the best husband in the world." Molly hugged him. The silver iron bird carried them to their homeland. Here already showed the lights of the city, where they have a change to another plane. They landed, clapped to the pilots, served the gangway. "Sit here, darling. Order yourself a coffee." Liam took his wife to a small airport cafe. "I'll deal with our luggage and call a cab." "Okay, but you won't be long." Molly smiled. The phone rang as soon as Liam switched it from airplane mode. "Liam, good evening. It's from the clinic. We're very sorry. We've done everything we can. Your son." "Cardiac arrest?" "Yes, all the necessary resuscitative measures were taken. Believe me, we grieve with you. We've already given the autopsy and medical results to your representative. When are you coming back?" "Okay, we'll get everything ready." Liam ended the call and stopped in the middle of the busy airport lobby. He was flanked on all sides by people in a hurry to leave or return. How would he and Molly get back now? His hands clenched helplessly. The phone fell to the cold, hard tiles of the floor and shattered. "Are you still there, darling?" Liam tried to speak as briskly as possible. "Sorry, I got held up. Can you believe I smashed my phone in the commotion?" "Oh, it's nothing. Come on, there's a cab waiting." All the way from one airport to the next, where they were to fly home, Molly chattered on and on about how well they were going to organize everything in the new house. What kind of flooring to put around the pool so it wouldn't be slippery, how William's room would be set up, the must-have bathroom with a ramp and directly adjacent to the bedroom, a staff call button by each bed, and in the restroom, and on and on and on. In the little airplane that was taking them to their hometown, she was tired and fell asleep. And Liam kept thinking this way and that, thinking how to tell her this terrible news. I should consult Emmanuel. He would tell me what to do. Oh, my phone is broken. All my contacts are there. They're home at last. Now they'll put her to rest and find the doctor's phone. Liam, Molly, you're finally back. I've been crying my eyes out. What a grief, but life went on. We'd had to work, move on. The house was now quiet, dusky, uncomfortable. There were 2 shifts, 2 caregivers with Molly around the clock. Liam's mother was at her side, quietly crying and praying. He himself spent most of his time at the office. He'd come home at midnight. He would ask the nurses how the day was going and go straight to his room. But one morning, Molly woke up unusually lively, ate well, smiled, and asked about Liam. "Do you want him to come?" The nurse asked her. "Yes, let him come." Molly nodded. "I want to tell him something." When the worried Liam entered the house, she herself ran out to meet him, smiling, bright and happy. "Liam, where are you getting to?" "Come on, we need to talk. You know, my love." She began as they made their way into the living room. "I had a dream about William today. Yeah, just like he was alive. No, don't worry. She raised her hand in a warning gesture. I know perfectly well now that he's no longer with us. But he was so joyful, so real, you know? And most of all, he walked and talked like a normal child. You know what that means? It means that where he is now, he's happy. And that means I'm happy. Don't you, dear? Asked Liam, looking into her eyes. He was surprised and pleased by his wife's reaction. Really, Liam? Molly answered firmly. I want to clean myself up and get on with my life. Tell those minders to get out of our house. I'm well now and I don't want to see strangers here. Very well, agreed Liam. He took both women into another room and asked them to rest for a while, to take a break. We'll see, he said to them. How will things go? I wouldn't trust such a sudden change if I were you, said the older of the two. Believe me, these patients can be very cunning at times. If I want your opinion, I will ask for it. Liam answered her rudely. He remembered well how well the treatment had worked last time. Why shouldn't the same thing happen now? After all, it had been so long. Molly had really cleaned herself up. She went to the beauty salon, did a new hairstyle, went shopping, bought some little things and a beautiful light-colored dress, and even had a manicure and pedicure. How do you like me? She smiled at her husband. Nothing? It's great. You're the most beautiful. He was as happy as a child. That afternoon, evening, and even night, they had a wonderful time. Everything, absolutely everything, seemed the same as before. In the morning, when Molly saw Liam off to work, she made breakfast and told him she was going to work at the orphanage. She said she really missed her tailed angels. Don't stay out too late, or you'll be exhausted. He kissed her and drove off to the office completely happy. Don't worry, I'll be here when you get back. His wife promised him and waved goodbye. She really was here, had been, and hadn't left for any orphanage. She was here while Liam, soothed by her fake normalcy, was at work. Still was, while he was on his way home. The doctor at the morgue then said it all happened some 15 minutes before he returned. He walked into the house and called out cheerfully, Molly, where are you, darling? I'm home. No one answered. He walked into the living room and saw her hanging in a noose from the chandelier hook. She was there. And yet, she was gone. It was over for him in that instant, everything. All joy, all sorrow, all love, all pain, all life. He no longer felt anything, no longer remembered eating, no longer remembered drinking, no longer remembered what he had done yesterday or the day before. No, he hadn't gone on a bender. He had gone inside himself, and only one simple action occupied him now. He had to visit Molly's grave every day, and he did. With fanatical regularity, arriving at the same time at the town cemetery, where two plaques hung on a simple wooden cross, his son William's and his wife Molly's. That was why he was so angry, that stupid letter the courier had brought. And then there was the conversation he'd unwittingly overheard in the cemetery. Enough. He decided suddenly. Enough of this torment. I won't bring her back from the other side. It's over. A strange thought occurred to him at the same time he made that decision. It must have been Dr. Emmanuel who had decided to shake him up in this way. But this was too much. Liam was angry again and turned the car around abruptly and drove not home but to the clinic. But there he was told that Dr. Feldman was now on vacation and would return only in 2 weeks. Then he had already set himself up internally for some kind of active work. He went to his office, where he hadn't been since the day his wife died. Good afternoon, Kelly. He said hello to his secretary, a trim woman in her 50s. Good afternoon, Liam. She was both surprised and delighted. "Would you ask all the department heads and Miranda to see me, please?" "Sure, sure. Liam, can I get you some coffee?" "Yes, please." Liam entered his office wistfully, looked around it. It was dark, dusty. It hadn't been cleaned in days. "Kelly." He went back out into the waiting room. "Get the cleaning lady to clean it up too." He nodded at the office door. "And invite everyone to the conference room." "I'll wait there." The conference room was more cheerful. Liam sat down at the long polished table, sighed, and looked out the window. When he looked out, he absent-mindedly looked around and found a newspaper left by someone right in front of him. It was lying backwards where they print short advertisements and crossword puzzles. So-and-so was doing a crossword puzzle. Turning over the printed matter, he saw on the front page a large, practically full-page photograph, and above it a caption in large letters, "Scandal at the Protestant New Path Artel." Teenagers were victims of sexual abuse by a pastor. Liam wrinkled his nose in annoyance. The yellow press. Suddenly his attention was drawn to a face in a common photo. Among the several sectarians in the picture, he suddenly recognized Molly. When the conference room staff arrived, Liam was already speeding down the highway, away from the city, to the neighboring state where the New Way Artel was located. When he arrived, he literally jumped out of the car and burst through the door of a small structure at the front of a huge fenced-in, high fence. The room at the entrance was full of people, mostly police and journalists. "Where are you going?" One of the policemen stopped him. "You can't come in here. There are investigations going on here." "My wife is here," shouted Liam. "I have to take her away. The sectarians, if that's what you mean, they've all been taken out of here." It was explained to him. "They're at this address. It's a former orphanage. They're being treated there, and they're looking for relatives." He didn't finish listening, grabbed a piece of paper with the address, and flew out of the building like a bullet. It took him a long loop through the unfamiliar city, looking for the right house, and finally he got there. "Is this where the ex-cultists are?" "Yes. Are you a relative? Come with me." A woman dressed as a nurse led him inside. "Here we have rooms for those who can't walk or are on drugs after withdrawal." They were mostly on drugs, and there, she waved her hand. Right down the corridor is the canteen and a large hallway, look too. Liam rushed out, peering at faces, turning each lying patient, not hoping for a resemblance. The woman in the picture had short and dark hair, but undoubtedly Molly's face. The search took him a long time. Another sister came in and began to help him, calling people by name, telling him about them, giving details. And then Liam had an epiphany. He pulled a picture of Molly out of his jacket. "Look, please, do you recognize her?" "Yes," the sister nodded. "That's Agnes. That's what she calls herself. Come on, she's probably in the hall." "Right? There she is." "Molly?" Liam couldn't believe himself, touched the shoulder of the woman sitting with her back to them by the window. She turned around, and he almost fell off his feet. It was indeed his wife. Emanuel Feldman was sitting in his office, comfortably sprawled in an armchair. Opposite him was his close friend and colleague who had come to consult with a rare patient. "Yes, your case is certainly interesting." Feldman said to him, "But you know, Robert, I have a story to tell too. There's a story that came out recently. It was in all the papers, as they say, but only a few people know the true state of affairs like this." And he told his friend the story of patient Molly from the day she first came to his clinic to the day she supposedly died. Yes, that's right, imaginary. Can you imagine, Robert? Her husband pulled her out of the noose himself, He was heartbroken. Who'd have thought it was just an elaborate staging? Turns out her old lover found out years later about the tragedy with their child. He'd been following her, and on the day she'd made her decision, he'd also been nearby, saw her husband leaving, climbed into the house, twisted her up, drugged her, put her in a noose just before he arrived, but tied the rope so it wouldn't do her much harm. But she looked really dead. He faked a respiratory arrest. You know that's possible, right? How did he do it? Oh, it was a clever con man. A criminal David Copperfield indeed. He used to be a banker, but then his business went under and he organized this infamous sect, which was recently shut down. He forgot himself, he thought he was God, and he crossed the line. He became a monster. So when he killed her like that, he arranged with the orderlies in the morgue, and the body was replaced by a dead girl from his sect. And he took his victim back to his lair, to this new path. She didn't need drugs to keep her there. She was already completely out of it after losing her child. Gladly, you might say, accepted the rules of the new game. She adapted there, called herself Agnes, but one day she managed to write and send a letter to her husband. That's where it all started, actually. She must have felt subconsciously that she was not in her normal life. You understand me, don't you, Robert? Oh, yes, my colleague agrees. We're just beginning to understand the mysteries of our subconscious. How bizarrely life sometimes weaves its threads, and we as silly moths fly to the false light of a distant lantern, not noticing these invisible obstacles. But often we get hopelessly entangled in them, breaking our wings, destroying our lives. A few years later, when all their old life had faded a bit, and they had already started anew, Molly and Liam were sitting on the veranda of their big house and cradling their newborn twins, a boy named Vanya and a girl named Mila. Liam, I was so worried that it might happen again. Thank you for convincing me to have these adorable babies. I'm happy, my love. I'm so happy. We will never be disturbed, you promise me. Liam nodded his head reassuringly. His Molly was now safely protected from anything that could hurt her. He had managed it. He had freed her and brought her back to life.